Hey everybody, this is Rocco's Fish. We're back with another video. Today I'm going to go over how to do a water change on a small tank. And I'm saying like a 1 gallon to a 20 gallon. Like tiny tanks. And the good news is that it's very easy to do a water change on these tanks because they're so tiny and they don't have big fish producing a lot of waste. So it is going to be easier to do it. So if you are a beginner fish keeper and are worried about the water changes, it's totally fine until you get a bigger tank. But for the small tanks, it's very easy to do a water change. So some things you need are a pot, and this can be any pot. I wouldn't use something to make scrambled eggs. I wouldn't use anything like that. So like no kitchen pots because they are obviously going to have those chemicals on them from washing them in the dishwasher or hand washed. So don't use any kitchen things. So for example, pots and pans. Don't use those unless you know that they're okay and you haven't put any sort of soap on it or haven't tried to clean it with any sort of chemical. Because if so, the chemicals are toxic to fish and will kill all of the fish in your tank 100%. And also make sure that you're not going to use a little cup. So, unless you have a really small tank, like half a gallon, then maybe you could use a cup. Like if you're a small child and you have half a gallon tank or like 1 gallon tank, you could use just a cup, just maybe a little bit bigger of one. And again, make sure it has not been washed or hand washed or anything like that with any chemicals. Again, it will kill all the fish in the tank. So just make sure that no chemicals have been in contact with the items that you're using for the water change. So, as I was saying, the first thing you will need is some sort of cup. And again, nothing that's washed. But a cup and a watering can. You could use the same cup, it's just going to take longer. But a watering can. You could use maybe a bucket. Just, it wouldn't be too good for the fish and the gravel underneath and the sand because it'll kind of mix it all around, so it could be frustrating to use it with a bucket. So I would just use things for gardening, so watering can, and that's to fill the tank, and the cup is to drain the tank. And now this is an optional one. I like using it, but I would get a 5-gallon bucket, and in the water change, usually when you have your cup, you have the water in it and you're trying to drain it somewhere. Usually, I like to drain it in either a bathtub, a toilet, or a sink. Just make sure it's not going to overflow. And with a sink, make sure it's a little bit deeper so that if you are using the bucket, it won't splash up and cause some huge mess. Trust me, I've done it before. So yeah, just make sure if you're going to do it on a sink, make sure it won't overflow or kind of like erupt out of the sink because it does backfire. And if you're doing it on a toilet, make sure that the toilet doesn't overflow. So again, this is optional, but I would get like a 5-gallon bucket. It'll just make the job quicker. Alright, so let's get started with this water change. So, the first thing you guys want to do is get all the items that I just listed. So I'll give you a minute to get all of them. And once you get all of the items that I just said, then what you do is you go over to your fish tank, and if you look behind it, there's a heater. Now, for this particular tank, there is a heater. I was going to say there isn't, but there is a heater. But for some tanks, there is no heater. You should have a heater in every single tank for the fish, but for a couple of tanks, there's probably no heater. But what you do is you unplug the heater, and if you don't know exactly what cord it is, you can trace it from the head of the heater and like keep tracing the cord down till you come to the outlet. And unplugging the heater will help you a lot in money because, first of all, then if you drain the water enough, the heater will not break because the heater will overheat because of the air and it will break. So just make sure to unplug the heater before you actually start draining the tank and doing anything. Alright, now that you have your heater unplugged, this is optional, but what you might want to do is you might want to take the thermometer out of the tank so that you're able to basically if you take the thermometer out of the tank, you'll be able to not have it get sucked up like on the filter, not in the filter, but on the filter, and it would just be a little bit easier. Like, it might not happen, but I'm not sure. So if you want, you guys can take out the thermometer in your tank. And if you're unsure of what I'm talking about, you can see it to the left of the tank. For this tank, since there's no filter, I'm not going to take it out. Now for the filter. If you have a filter, unplug the filter or stop it so like it can't suck up any of the air and again overheat and get broken. And that's just a way to save money. I would highly recommend doing that, obviously. But yeah, now let's actually start the water change. And I nearly forgot. What you might want to do for a small tank is you might want to take the lid off. For this particular tank, it's either, I think, a 10 gallon or a 5 gallon. So for this tank, it's a glass lid, so it doesn't open fully like a 20 gallon tank. And I'll have to take the lid off. So if you guys don't see light in the tank for a little bit, then it's okay. Alright, now that you took the lid off, if you have that type of tank, now that you took the lid off, now we can really get started. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get the cup that you're going to use for the water change and just take out a portion of the water. And make sure that you're not sucking up any fish, because if so, that fish isn't going to die from that, but it's going to die from being dumped down the tub. So just make sure you don't do that. Now here's where the bucket comes in. Once you start draining the water, you're going to see the water's in your cup and you need to get rid of it. You could either go to a sink, pour it out in the sink, a tub, or a toilet, pour it out in there, or you could get a bucket. Now with a bucket, you do have to be a little careful that you don't spill the water everywhere with a cup, but a bucket I would highly recommend for the water change to put the water in. And guys, if you look up at the top left of the tank, you can see I have the golden snail. Snails are completely fine. I mean, do some research on your snails, but snails roughly can stay out of the water for 3 days. They just have to be in a humid environment. But your snails, if you have some in there, will be perfectly fine, like staying out of the water. So, now that I have done the water change and the water is halfway down, which is basically the recommended for probably a small tank. For a bigger tank, I would do either halfway if it's really dirty, or just a quarter because it's a really big tank. So, for now, I would go halfway if your tank's dirty. And now that we have the water in the bucket, what we have to do is we have to drain the bucket in some sort of sink, tub, or toilet so that the water doesn't go everywhere. And now that you have the water poured out of the bucket, or you're still halfway, what you do is you get the watering can, like I said, and fill it up with lukewarm temperature. So, like, medium temperature water. So, I would say about 75, 76 degree water, maybe 77, it depends on the temperature of your tank, so just make sure you pour in that right water temperature so your fish doesn't go into a shock because of the water temperature difference. And now we're done. And once you finish, I would probably take the lid and put it back on the tank, obviously. If your tank has a glass lid, if it has the plastic lid where it opens all the way, then you don't need to do that. But for a 20 gallon, I think you might need more than one bucket of water, like more than one watering can full of water, because it's a 20 gallon tank. This one I think is a 10 or 5 gallon tank, so it only took one container for me, one bucket. So it was very easy. And yeah, once you get the lid on, then you'll be all set. And we are done. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you. Haha, gotcha. No, you are supposed to plug in your heater. Make sure you remember that. Got you guys, probably. And if you want, you probably will, but if you want, as you see, there are a few decorations kind of like falling over. What you could do is you could just take them and put them back in order. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. And if this video gets 500 views, I'll do a part 2 on a larger tank. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.